Let's call the situation by its true name: the betrayal of citizens through their own self-sacrifice, allowing Arab Muslim migrants into their country. How painful it is for a person living in a Western society to admit that their system has simply failed. How hard it is to say out loud that we must stop, reflect, and admit the truth that we have failed. Now, after failing, we must rise and declare clearly that all migrants since 1945 who have dispersed around the world must be returned to their countries of origin. Therefore, the UK, France, the United States, and all other civilized Western countries, including Sweden and other bleeding nations, are obligated to rise and act. It must be understood that a decisive, strong, and uncompromising action must be taken with the full support of the citizens by appointing a person or lawmakers who will actually carry out the mission of the hour. And what is this mission? The removal of all migrants from the Western civilized country and returning them to their homeland without any consideration, without any emotions, without anything, just to act. Yes, it is very painful, very difficult, and very surprising for the Western citizen who has reached a broken point and finds themselves almost helpless. As an Israeli living in the heart of the problematic coexistence between Jews and Arabs within Israel, I want to tell you that this is a necessity. Therefore, in the great war against Ishmael and his complete defeat, Western countries must first understand that this is a failure called self-sacrifice. Citizens must stop being victims and acknowledge the truth. The removal of all Arab Muslim migrants is a moral and conscientious duty. By removing them and returning them to Arab countries where they belong, world peace can be achieved. But if we continue to be afraid, continue to hesitate, and think that somehow things will work out on their own, it is a delusion. In reality, a person is shooting themselves, which is their country. The necessity of repatriating Arab Muslim migrants from Western countries. Introduction. The issue of allowing Arab Muslim migrants into Western countries has become a point of significant concern. This discussion is not rooted in xenophobia or racism, but in a practical examination of the challenges and failures associated with integrating a population whose cultural and religious ideologies often clash with Western values. It is painful for individuals in Western societies to admit that their inclusive system may have failed. However, facing this reality is essential for the preservation of social harmony and national security. Historical context and current realities. Since 1945, millions of migrants from the Arab world have settled in various Western countries, seeking better economic opportunities and fleeing conflict. While many have integrated successfully, a significant number have not, leading to increased instances of terrorism, social unrest, and cultural clashes. For example, terrorist attacks such as the 9/11 attacks in the United States, the London bombings in 2005, and the numerous attacks in France, including the 2015 Paris attacks, underscore the severe consequences of failing to address these integration issues effectively. The argument for repatriation. 1. Security concerns. Numerous terrorist attacks in Western countries have been perpetrated by radicalized individuals from Arab Muslim backgrounds. According to the Global Terrorism Database, there have been thousands of such incidents in Western nations since the 1990s, resulting in significant loss of life and economic damage. 2. Social cohesion. The presence of large, unassimilated migrant populations has led to parallel societies and cultural friction. Countries like Sweden and Germany have seen significant social unrest and an increase in crime rates attributed to these communities. 3. Economic impact. The economic burden of supporting large migrant populations is substantial. Public services such as healthcare, education, and housing are strained, leading to resentment among the native population. 4. Moral responsibility. Western countries have a moral duty to ensure the safety and well-being of their citizens. Allowing unregulated migration from regions with high levels of radicalism undermines this duty. Public and political support. Numerous public figures and politicians have echoed these concerns. For instance, former UK Prime Minister David Cameron once referred to the failure of multiculturalism in integrating migrant populations, and French President Emmanuel Macron has spoken about the need to address the separatism within French society. Conclusion. The necessity of repatriating Arab Muslim migrants from Western countries is a measure driven by the need to maintain security, social cohesion, and economic stability. It is not about xenophobia or racism, but about recognizing and addressing the failures of past policies. It requires a decisive and uncompromising approach supported by the citizens and executed by their elected representatives. By doing so, Western nations can ensure the safety and prosperity of their societies for future generations. Examples and quotations. 1. David Cameron, former UK Prime Minister. Under the doctrine of state multiculturalism, we have encouraged different cultures to live separate lives, apart from each other and apart from the mainstream. We've failed to provide a vision of society to which they feel they want to belong. 2. Emmanuel Macron, French President. We are fighting against a political religious project which seeks to secede from our republic. Practical implementation. Policy changes. Revising visa policies to limit new immigration from high-risk regions. Support for repatriation. Offering financial and logistical support for voluntary repatriation. Strengthening borders. Enhancing border security to prevent illegal immigration. TERRORISM. Addressing the challenge of repatriating radical Arab Muslim migrants from Western countries. Introduction. The issue of radical Arab Muslim migrants in Western countries is a growing concern. This discussion is driven by the practical need to address the challenges posed by individuals whose actions and beliefs are fundamentally at odds with Western values. The solution lies in acknowledging the problem, making difficult decisions, and taking firm actions to ensure the safety and cohesion of Western societies. Chapter 4. Identifying and acting on the problem. To address this issue, Western governments must first identify individuals who pose a threat to social order and security. This involves distinguishing between those who behave in a barbaric manner and those who respect the rule of law. A strong, decisive approach is necessary to deal with those who refuse to integrate or pose a threat to public safety. For instance, there are areas in the UK where it is unsafe for Westerners who do not adhere to Islamic beliefs. This situation necessitates immediate and decisive action, not just a warning sign, but a comprehensive strategy to remove these threats. Governmental decision and legislative action. A government decision supported by comprehensive legislation is required to repatriate radical migrants. Western countries have the capability to execute such measures. The wisdom, experience, and resilience of Western governance can be harnessed to implement a policy of repatriation. Repatriation as a moral and practical imperative. Repatriating radical migrants is not an act of racism or hatred, but a practical necessity born out of the recognition that certain cultural and ideological differences are irreconcilable under the same national framework. When democracy is unable to accommodate these differences, it becomes imperative to take action. If a vote were held in countries like the UK, USA, or France, it is likely that the majority would support the repatriation of migrants who threaten national security and social cohesion. Implementing repatriation. The process of repatriation involves 1. Identifying threats. Using intelligence and law enforcement to identify individuals and groups who pose a threat. 2. Legislative support. Passing laws that support the repatriation of identified threats. 3. Logistical execution. Organizing the safe and orderly repatriation of these individuals to their countries of origin. Overcoming challenges and misconceptions. Western societies must overcome the fear of being labeled as racist or intolerant. The focus should be on the safety and stability of the nation. Radical Islamists and their supporters, with their displays of hatred and intolerance, reveal their inability to coexist peacefully within Western societies. Examples and quotations. David Cameron, former UK Prime Minister. Under the doctrine of state multiculturalism, we have encouraged different cultures to live separate lives, apart from each other and apart from the mainstream. We've failed to provide a vision of society to which they feel they want to belong. Emmanuel Macron, French President. We are fighting against a political religious project which seeks to secede from our republic. Consequences of inaction. If radical Arab Muslim migrants are not repatriated, Western countries will face continued security risks, social unrest, economic strain, and the erosion of national identity and values. On the other hand, implementing repatriation could reduce terrorist threats, increase social cohesion, provide economic relief, and protect cultural identity despite potential short-term logistical challenges and international criticism. Conclusion. Repatriating radical Arab Muslim migrants is a necessary step for Western countries to ensure their security, social cohesion, and economic stability. It is a difficult but essential action that requires decisive leadership and the support of the populace. By taking these steps, Western nations can preserve their values and protect their citizens from the threats posed by radical elements within their borders. Addressing Arab hatred towards the West, a comprehensive analysis. The phenomenon of Arab hatred towards Western countries is complex and influenced by a variety of factors, including political, religious, cultural, and historical conflicts. While it is challenging to obtain precise statistical data on this issue, several examples and documented cases indicate the existence of hatred and prejudice by Arab groups towards the West. Daburi, examples and statistics. Terror attacks. Terror attacks carried out by extremist Arab Muslim groups against Western countries exemplify the hatred and violence directed at the West. September 11, 2001. Attacks. The Al-Qaeda organization executed one of the deadliest attacks in the United States, resulting in approximately 3,000 deaths and thousands of injuries. Paris attacks, 2015. A group of ISIS terrorists carried out a series of attacks in Paris, killing 130 people and injuring hundreds. Manchester attack, 2017. A suicide bombing at a music concert in Manchester, carried out by an Islamic extremist, killed 22 people and injured around 120. Anti-Semitic and anti-Western actions. Germany. Between 2015 and 2020, there was a 30% increase in anti-Semitic and anti-Western actions carried out by extremist Arab Muslim groups. France. Between 2012 and 2020, a 20% increase in anti-Semitic and anti-Western actions by extremist Arab Muslim groups was recorded. Public opinion surveys. Surveys in Arab countries. Surveys conducted in Arab countries like Egypt, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia show that a significant percentage of the population holds negative views towards Western countries, primarily due to Western foreign policies in the Middle East and their support for Israel. Causes of hatred and prejudice. Political factors. Military conflicts. Wars such as the Iraq War, military intervention in Libya, and support for conflicts in Syria provoke hostility towards the West. Western foreign policy. Western support for Israel and their stance on Palestinian issues incite hostility and hatred from Arab Muslim groups. Religious factors. Religious extremism. Extremist ideologies within Islam, such as those of ISIS and Al-Qaeda, preach hatred and violence towards the West. Religious interpretation. Certain interpretations of the Quran and Islamic traditions provoke hatred towards non-Muslim countries. Cultural and social factors. Cultural gaps. Cultural differences and divergent values between the Arab world and the West arouse suspicion and hatred. Racism and discrimination. Feelings of discrimination and racism towards Arab Muslims in Western countries exacerbate hatred and hostility towards the West. No solution, except for repatriation. Recognizing the complexity of these issues is crucial, but the only viable solution to ensure the safety and stability of Western societies is the complete repatriation of all Arab migrants back to their countries of origin. This conclusion is drawn from the necessity to protect national security, maintain social cohesion, and uphold the values of Western civilization. Implementing repatriation. The process of repatriation involves identifying threats, using intelligence and law enforcement to identify individuals and groups who pose a threat, legislative support, passing laws that support the repatriation of identified threats, logistical execution, organizing the safe and orderly repatriation of these individuals to their countries of origin. Consequences of inaction. The consequences of failing to address this issue decisively are severe. Continued security risks, social unrest, economic strain, and the erosion of national identity and values are inevitable if radical Arab Muslim migrants are allowed to remain. Conclusion. Repatriating radical Arab Muslim migrants is a necessary step for Western countries to ensure their security, social cohesion, and economic stability. It is a difficult but essential action that requires decisive leadership and the support of the populace. By taking these steps, Western nations can preserve their values and protect their citizens from the threats posed by radical elements within their borders.